1995, an entire cheerleading team from Arizona vanished without a trace after a performance. No warnings, no goodbyes, just a chilling silence that would haunt 7 families for decades. For 20 long years, their parents lived with questions that had no answers. Until one day, deep in the desert, a lone hiker stumbled upon something that would turn everything upside down and finally force the truth to the surface. The morning sun spilled through the windows of a quiet kitchen in Chandler, Arizona. Marissa Green sat across from her husband, David, a mug of coffee warming her hands as another day began, one like so many others before it. Except, this wasn't just any day. It marked 20 years since their twin daughters, April and Amber, went missing. They would have been 34 by now. Not a day passed without Marissa wondering what their lives might have looked like, whether they'd have families of their own, careers, laughter, traditions, but those questions had no answers. Not yet. Suddenly, the phone buzzed against the table, breaking the silence. She reached for it casually, expecting a message from work, or maybe someone from the support group she'd joined years ago. But the name on the screen made her freeze. Detective Holbrook. "David," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's him." David looked up from his newspaper, the name hitting him like a jolt of electricity. Holbrook had led the investigation into their daughter's disappearance until the trail went cold. There had been no contact in years. "Answer it," David urged, setting his cup down with a hand that now trembled. Marissa tapped the screen and put the call on speaker. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Mrs. Green," the detective's voice came through. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," she replied quickly. "Is something wrong?" "I wouldn't say wrong," he said carefully. "But we've had a major development in the case. I'd rather explain it in person. Can you and your husband come in?" David was already reaching for his keys. "We'll be there right away." When the call ended, silence hung over the kitchen like a held breath. Neither of them spoke, afraid to hope, afraid to say too much. Finally, David squeezed her hand. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." They left their breakfast untouched and were on the road in minutes. The sun lit up the streets of Chandler, a town that had changed in 20 years. New buildings, wider roads, a place April and Amber might not even recognize today. "I didn't think we'd ever hear from him again," Marissa said quietly, watching the city blur past. David nodded, knuckles tight on the wheel. Part of me never stopped waiting. When they arrived at the police station, the parking lot was unusually full. Marissa scanned the cars and felt her chest tighten. The other parents are here. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and freshly mopped floors. The receptionist greeted them gently and guided them down the hall. When they stepped into the conference room, 4 other sets of parents were already seated around a large table, people whose lives had also been frozen in 1995. Linda and Robert Thompson, Judith and Michael Lee, Susan Collins, and the Riveras. Each face worn with time, each heart carrying the same invisible weight. Detective Holbrook stood at the front. His hair had grayed, and the lines on his face had deepened, but his presence was just as steady. "Mr. and Mrs. Green," he said with a nod, "thank you for coming. Please, take a seat." As they settled in, the room grew still. Then Holbrook took a breath and began. "Early this morning, a hiker discovered something in the Sonoran Desert. We believe it may be connected to your daughter's disappearance." And just like that, 2 decades of silence began to crack. The detective tapped a few keys, and an image filled the wall-mounted screen. A rusted metal suitcase, half buried beneath a flat desert stone. The lid was open, revealing what looked like faded fabric inside, red and white. "Those are the uniforms," Susan Collins whispered, her hand covering her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Marissa leaned in, her heart pounding. Even through the dust and wear, the fabric was unmistakable, identical to the cheer outfits her daughters had worn the night they vanished. Detective Holbrook continued, his voice steady. "The discovery was made by a hiker and his dog. They were exploring an isolated stretch of the Sonoran Desert, far from any usual trails. His dog picked up a scent and started digging. That's when they found the suitcase. "Where exactly?" David asked, his voice controlled, but Marissa could see the strain behind his eyes. "Roughly 30 miles outside of Chandler," the detective replied. He clicked again, revealing a wide-angle shot of the barren, sun-baked land surrounding the site. "Our forensic team is already processing the area." Marissa spoke without hesitation. "I want to see it. I need to see it." Around the room, other parents nodded in quiet agreement. Holbrook hesitated. "There's no need to go there right now. The suitcase and its contents are being taken to the lab. The hiker is scheduled to give a full statement later today." "Please," Linda Thompson said, her voice cracking. "After 2 decades, we need to see this with our own eyes." Holbrook looked at the group, worn faces that had waited far too long for any kind of answer, and finally gave a reluctant nod. "I'll check with the field team." As he stepped into the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, the room buzzed with hushed conversations and quiet speculation. But Marissa wasn't listening. Her thoughts spun with one burning question. Why now? Why, after all this time, had someone brought the uniforms back? Minutes later, the detective returned. "You can come, but you'll need to follow protocol. Stay behind the marked area, don't touch anything, and follow every instruction given at the scene." "Thank you," Marissa breathed, and David added, "We understand. We'll follow your lead." 15 minutes later, a small caravan of cars pulled away from the station. Holbrook's unmarked vehicle at the front, followed by 5 cars carrying parents who had lived for years in the space between hope and heartbreak. As the city gave way to open desert, Marissa's thoughts drifted to that night in 1995. A cheerleading competition. April and Amber, just 14, had been electric with excitement after placing second. They'd called to share the news, voices bubbling with joy. "We'll call again when we're on the way home," they'd promised. But that call never came. When the convoy arrived at the site, the sun was blazing overhead. The terrain was dry, cracked, and harsh. They parked near a cluster of police vehicles and walked nearly half a mile across hard desert ground. A white tent stood in the distance, surrounded by yellow tape and officers moving with quiet purpose. Near the edge of the scene stood a man with a dog on a leash. Detective Holbrook motioned to them. "This is Chris Delaney, the hiker who made the discovery, and that's Dusty." Chris, a weathered man in his early 40s, stepped forward and shook hands with each parent. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances," he said softly. "Thank you for what you did," Marissa told him, her voice catching. "You can't imagine what this means to us." Chris gave a small nod. "Dusty's the real hero. He wouldn't stop digging." The dog, a mix of Australian Shepherd and Lab, sat calmly beside him, eyes sharp and alert. "Can we see the suitcase?" David asked. Holbrook guided them beneath the tent. There, placed carefully on a folding table, was the rusted suitcase, and inside, the same red and white uniforms they all remembered. Time had worn them, but the pattern, the fabric, it was unmistakable. A forensic technician explained, "Based on the condition, we believe the uniforms were buried here fairly recently, maybe within the last year." "Recently?" Peter Rivera echoed. "But they went missing 2 decades ago." "That's what makes this so unusual," Holbrook admitted. "Whoever buried the suitcase didn't dig deep. The stone covering it wasn't heavy, almost like they didn't think anyone would ever come this far into the desert." As the parents moved closer, eyes locked on the uniforms that once danced under stadium lights, Marissa felt something shift. For the first time in 20 years, the silence had cracked, and in that quiet desert, something was finally beginning to speak. Movement appeared on the edge of the desert. 3 vehicles approaching across the rugged terrain. One bore the logo of a local news station. The other, a plain sedan, sparked a flicker of recognition in Marissa's mind. When it stopped and the door opened, The sight of the man stepping out made her heart skip. Vincent Caraway, the girls' old cheerleading coach, was walking toward them with steady purpose. His once dark hair had turned silver at the sides, but his athletic posture and assured stride remained unchanged. "Marissa." "David!" he called out, his voice firm but warm. "I came as soon as I heard." Detective Holbrook stepped forward and extended his hand. "Coach, thanks for getting here so fast." Caraway shook it firmly. "When it's about my girls, I don't hesitate." Even after 2 decades, Marissa noticed, he still called them that, his girls. Back when the search first began, he had gone above and beyond, leveraging every contact, spending his own money, keeping the investigation alive even when others had begun to give up. Holbrook turned to the group. "We've decided to inform the press. This case impacted more than just your families. It affected the whole community. People deserve to know that something has been found." Just outside the tent, cameras were being set up. A young reporter was already gathering details from an officer nearby. Meanwhile, Caraway stepped closer to the evidence table. He stared at the red and white uniforms with a gaze full of emotion. "I never stopped hoping," he said quietly. Then, turning to Chris Delaney and his dog, he added, "Thank you. What you found might finally lead to real answers." He reached out to shake Chris's hand, his gratitude unmistakable. Caraway then made his way through the crowd of parents, offering a comforting handshake or a gentle squeeze on the shoulder. When he got to Marissa and David, his tone softened. "It's been a long time," he said. "How are you holding up?" David answered. "As well as we can." "We heard you're not with the school anymore," Marissa added. "I left about 10 years ago," Caraway said. "I still coach, though. Started my own private program." Before they could say more, a reporter approached, flanked by a cameraman. "We'd like to speak with the parents, if that's all right," she said, glancing at Holbrook for approval. He gave a small nod. "One at a time. Keep it short." The interviews began. Each set of parents stepped up, sharing what this discovery meant to them, a flicker of hope in the darkness they'd lived in for so long. Marissa watched as Susan Collins broke down mid-sentence, unable to continue speaking about her daughter Rachel. Then came their turn. Marissa and David stood side by side, holding hands tightly. The reporter looked at Marissa. "Mrs. Green, how does it feel to have a new lead after 20 years?" Marissa took a breath. "It's overwhelming. We never stopped searching, never stopped believing. If April and Amber are out there and somehow see this, we want them to know we haven't given up. We never will." The reporter turned to David. "And you, Mr. Green, what are you hoping for now?" His voice was calm, but Marissa felt the tremor in his hand. "We're hoping for answers, for truth, but more than anything, we want to bring our girls home, alive if we can." After the camera stopped rolling, Marissa suddenly remembered her camera and water bottle still sitting in the car. "I'm going to grab them," she told David. "My phone can't capture this place the way I need it to." "I'll come with you," he said. They checked in with Detective Holbrook before leaving. "That's fine," he said. "Just stick to the marked path. It's easy to lose your bearings out here, and we've had enough people go missing." They nodded and began retracing their steps across the hard-packed desert. The sun was unforgiving now, heat shimmering off the sand. As they walked, Marissa scanned the horizon, and something caught her eye. A pickup truck, mostly hidden behind a rise, and 2 men. One appeared to be dragging something heavy toward the vehicle, while the other crouched behind some rocks near a cactus. "David," she whispered, stopping him. "Look." He followed her gaze. "I see them. There's someone in the truck, too." "What are they doing way out here?" she murmured. "Probably off-roading or camping," David offered, though uncertainty crept into his voice. Marissa frowned. "That one's dragging something heavy, and the other's watching from cover. That's not a picnic." Without waiting, she veered off the path, heading toward the figures in the distance. Marissa, David hissed, rushing after her. What are you doing? Holbrook said, I know what he said, but something's off. I can feel it. David caught up and grabbed her arm gently. This could be dangerous. We should go back and tell Holbrook. By the time we do that, they might be gone, she argued, pulling free. I need to know if this has anything to do with our daughters. They were getting closer now, and the men had noticed. One of them stood quickly. The other turned toward the truck. Marissa raised her hand. Hey, she called out. You out here for the search? But no answer came, just a long, tense pause. Something was definitely wrong. Marissa raised her hand in greeting, calling out, Hello there! What happened next sent a chill through her. The men immediately shouted to one another and dropped everything. The one dragging the sack hoisted it into the bed of their truck, while the other sprinted from the rocks, a shovel gripped tightly in his hands. In a flash, all three of them were inside the vehicle. The engine roared to life and they sped away, kicking up a thick trail of dust behind them. Did you see that? Marissa gasped. They ran, just like that. Before the truck disappeared over the ridge, she caught a glimpse of something on the rear window. A sticker, possibly a company logo. Instinctively, she raised her phone and snapped a photo, but it was too late. The image came out blurry and distorted. There was some kind of logo on the back, she said, her heart pounding. Did you see it? David nodded, frowning. Yeah, but I didn't recognize it. They stood for a moment, watching the dust settle, before Marissa felt a familiar pull in her chest. That mix of instinct and desperation only a parent could know. Without a word, she turned and started walking toward where the men had been. Marissa, we need to get back, David said, catching up. We're way off the path. Just a little farther, she insisted. I have to see what they were doing. When they reached the cactus and the rocks, she crouched, scanning the disturbed ground. The soil was loose, freshly dug. David dropped beside her, brushing his hand over the sand. There's something here, he said, fingers closing around a small, half-buried object. He held it up, brushing the dirt away. Marissa's breath caught. Oh my God, David! That's Amber's earring. He placed it gently in her palm. The tiny silver star with a red gem in the center was tarnished from time, but unmistakable. She had given matching earrings to both girls for their 13th birthday, just months before they vanished. Are you sure? David whispered. I'm sure, Marissa said, tears forming. I'd know this anywhere. Her voice shook as she looked up. These men, they know something. They have to. They searched the area, hoping to find more. But it was clear the men had taken everything else with them. The earring was all they had, and it was enough to send them rushing back toward the site. We have to tell Detective Holbrook, Marissa said as they hurried across the desert. Those men might be the key to everything. When they returned, the detective was deep in discussion with one of the forensic specialists. Parents stood nearby, some speaking to officers, others staring into the distance, waiting, hoping. Detective! Marissa called, urgency in her voice. He turned, concern immediately crossing his face. What is it? We found something, David said. Marissa opened her hand and held out the earring. This belonged to our daughter Amber, she said. I gave matching pairs to both girls on their birthday. Holbrook took it carefully, examining the worn metal. Where did you find this? About half a mile that way, David said, pointing. We saw 3 men near a truck. One was dragging a heavy sack. Another was digging. As soon as they saw us, they ran, Marissa added. We followed where they'd been and found the earring in the sand. Holbrook's brow furrowed. You followed 3 unknown men in the desert? That's incredibly dangerous. We know, David said, but we couldn't just stand there. If they're connected, we couldn't risk them getting away. They might be cleaning up other evidence right now, Marissa added, trying to erase something before it's found. By now, the other parents had gathered around, listening closely. Vincent Carraway stepped forward, his face tense. "What's happening?" he asked. Holbrook lifted the earring. "The Greens found this. Mrs. Green believes it belonged to Amber." Caraway looked closely. That does look like what they used to wear." "Did you get a good look at the men?" Holbrook asked, turning back to the couple. "Would you recognize them?" "It was too far to see faces," David said, "but I think I remember one of their builds, maybe what they were wearing." "There was a sticker on the back window," Marissa added. "A logo. I took a photo, but it's not very clear." She showed him the blurry image on her phone. He studied it for a moment, then said, "Could you try drawing it?" Marissa hesitated. "I'm no artist, but I can try." Holbrook handed her a notepad and pen. She took a breath and began to sketch, hands still trembling. "I'll try," Marissa murmured, her brows drawn together as she focused on the sketch. Slowly, she tried to recreate the logo she had glimpsed on the back window of the fleeing truck. After a minute, she handed the notepad back to Detective Holbrook. It looked something like this: a stylized bird, maybe a phoenix with wings curved around 3 bold letters, C, P, and F. Linda Thompson, quiet until now, suddenly stepped forward, her expression shifting. "CPF? That sounds like Caraway Performance and Fitness." All eyes turned to Vincent Caraway. "Caraway Performance and Fitness," Holbrook repeated slowly, turning his gaze to the coach. Marissa's pulse quickened. Could the man who had once trained their daughters be connected, in any way, to what had happened? Caraway lifted his hands in a calm, measured gesture. "My company did sponsor the cheerleading team back then. We also helped fund the search when the girls went missing. Everything was fully transparent." "That's true," Holbrook confirmed, addressing the parents. "Caraway's company cooperated fully. They provided volunteers and financial resources when the official investigation was winding down. They were thoroughly vetted at the time." "Did you catch the license plate on the truck?" he asked Marissa and David. "There wasn't one," David replied, "or at least not that we could see." "No plate at all?" Holbrook jotted down the note. "That alone is suspicious." Nearby, Michael Lee, Hannah's father, had been working on his own sketch. He held it up. "Did it look like this?" His version showed a bold CPF enclosed by outstretched wings, strikingly close to what Marissa had described. "Yes," Marissa confirmed immediately. "That's it. That's exactly what I saw." Caraway studied the image, then gave a slow nod. "That definitely resembles the old logo of CPF, but I haven't owned the company in years." "You sold it?" Holbrook asked, raising an eyebrow. "To a man named Matthew Rands," Caraway answered. "I stayed on briefly as a consultant, which is why the company name was still linked to me during the initial search. But I haven't had an official role since before the girls disappeared." Holbrook made another note. "I'll need all the details, the sale documents, current contact info for Mr. Rands." "Of course," Caraway agreed. "Anything that helps move this forward." Turning back to Marissa and David, the detective asked, "Can you show us exactly where you found the earring and saw the truck?" "It's just over that ridge," David said. "We can point it out." "I want to check for tire tracks," Holbrook explained. "If they left quickly, they may have left us something we can follow." Marissa nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking. The road they used isn't traveled much. The prints might still be fresh." The detective thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'll send a team right away, but I need the 2 of you to stay at base camp or head back to the station. This could turn dangerous fast." "We understand," David said. Marissa looked like she wanted to argue, but after a pause she nodded. "Can we at least wait nearby, from a safe distance?" Holbrook gave a reluctant nod. "You can stay at the base camp, but that's it. No more breaking off on your own." "I mean it." As Holbrook called together a small team of officers, Chris Delaney stepped forward with Dusty. "I know that stretch of desert pretty well," he offered. If you need someone to help guide your team, I appreciate it, Holbrook interrupted. But no civilian involvement right now. We can't take that risk. Chris nodded in understanding. I get it. Just wanted to offer. Marissa gently touched his arm. Thank you. Honestly, you and Dusty may have changed everything. Chris gave a modest smile. Just glad we could help. Before heading back, Marissa handed the earring to Detective Holbrook. He sealed it carefully in an evidence bag. We'll find out what happened to your daughters, he said quietly. One way or another. Marissa nodded, hope and fear swirling inside her. After all these years, they were closer than ever. But how close? And to what? The drive back to base camp felt far longer than the journey out. Marissa stared out the window, eyes tracing the endless desert, her thoughts spinning. Who were those men? What were they doing out there? Digging, dragging, hiding. And what did they know about April and Amber? We should eat something, David suggested as they neared a small cluster of buildings on the edge of town. A gas station, a dusty diner, and what looked like a general store. Marissa hesitated, then gave a small nod. Food was the last thing on her mind. But David was right. They needed strength for whatever was coming next. They needed to stay sharp for whatever was coming next. The parking lot outside the diner was just a sun-bleached patch of gravel, scattered with a few trucks and sedans. The flickering neon open sign in the window was the only sign of life for miles, a splash of cheer against the barren backdrop of the desert. Inside, the air was cooler, the lighting dim. A classic roadside diner, red vinyl booths, worn spinning stools at the counter, and the ever-present smell of grilled onions and fresh coffee. A few locals sipped from heavy mugs, chatting quietly. Marissa and David picked the booth farthest from the door, choosing privacy with a view of anyone who might walk in. A waitress, late 40s, tired eyes but a kind smile, approached with a coffee pot and 2 laminated menus. Afternoon, folks, she said brightly. Coffee while you decide? Yes, please, David replied, flipping his cup upright. After taking their order, a club sandwich for David, soup for Marissa, the waitress disappeared behind the counter. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the morning settling over them again. I can't believe we found Amber's earring, Marissa said softly at last, eyes fixed on the edge of her cup. After all this time, it can't be a coincidence. David cradled his mug, staring into the dark liquid. I know, but we have to let the police do their job. Those men could be dangerous. Marissa leaned forward, eyes fierce. But what if the police don't find them? What if those men know where our daughters are and just disappear again? We should go back, follow the tire tracks, see where they lead. That's not safe, Marissa, David said quietly but firmly. The detectives have training, equipment. We don't. Let them do what they're trained to do. Do they? She shot back, her voice low but sharp. 20 years, David. 20 years. And they found nothing. A hiker and his dog found more in one afternoon than the whole investigation ever did. What does that say? David reached across the table, gently took her hand. I get it. I do. But charging into the desert again, alone, could end badly. For us. And for them. Their conversation was interrupted as the waitress returned, placing the plates down with quiet efficiency. Here you go. Need anything else? David gave her a polite smile. We're good, thank you. As the waitress tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, Marissa froze. There, dangling from the woman's earlobe, was an earring, a tiny silver star with a red gemstone in the center. Marissa's heart skipped. Her voice caught in her throat, but then she forced the words out. Excuse me, that earring, where did you get it? The waitress blinked, surprised by the question, but not alarmed. Her hand instinctively touched her earlobe. This old thing? A customer gave it to me years ago, said it matched my eyes. It's just the one, though. He told me the other was lost, but I could keep this one if I wanted. David, now staring at the earring with the same shock, asked gently, "Was he local?" She frowned thoughtfully. "Don't think so, but he came in a few times over the years, always polite. Big tipper." She motioned toward the corkboard near the entrance. "He's probably up there on our customer wall." "Thank you," Marissa said, barely able to keep her voice steady. "It's beautiful." The waitress smiled and moved on to another table. David and Marissa turned, rising from their booth and moving toward the wall of photographs, snapshots of birthdays, road-tripping tourists, smiling truckers posing with staff. There were dozens, maybe more. "Do you see him?" David asked under his breath. "Not yet," Marissa whispered, scanning face after face. Then her phone rang, loud, shrill, startling. She jumped, fumbling it out of her bag. The number was unfamiliar. Stepping away for privacy, she answered. "Hello? Mrs. Green? This is Officer Mendez. I'm part of Detective Holbrook's field team." "Yes. Did you find something?" "We followed the tire tracks to a rundown shack about 5 miles from where you spotted those men," he said. "We found the truck. It was abandoned." Marissa's chest tightened. "And the men?" "No sign of them. We searched the entire area, inside and out. Nothing. The truck was completely stripped. No bag, no tools, no personal items. Clean. So they'd vanished again. "We've impounded the vehicle," Mendez added. "It's being processed now. Detective Holbrook wanted you to know we're not stopping. We're going to keep pushing." "Thank you," she said softly. "Please keep us updated." She ended the call and returned to the booth, where David sat waiting. "They found the truck," she told him, "abandoned near an old shack, but the men were gone." David exhaled slowly. "At least they have the vehicle. Maybe they'll find fingerprints. Something." Marissa nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Not on the truck, not on the shack. Her eyes drifted again toward the waitress, toward the earring, the same exact earring she had buried in a birthday box 20 years ago. Her gut told her this was no coincidence. Somehow, someway, this woman, or the man who gave her that earring, was connected to April and Amber. And right now, that waitress might be the most important lead they had. Marissa's throat tightened as she watched the waitress move from table to table, unaware of how deeply significant that small piece of jewelry on her ear truly was. David was absently picking at his sandwich, but Marissa hadn't touched her soup. The idea that this woman might unknowingly hold a clue to their daughter's fate was almost too much to bear. When the waitress returned with the coffee pot, Marissa couldn't wait any longer. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice low but urgent. "It might sound strange, but please, just hear me out." The waitress paused, lowering the pot, curious but not yet concerned. "Is something wrong with the food?" "No, it's not that," Marissa said quickly. It's your earring." David shot her a wary glance, but Marissa continued anyway. "This morning, I found its match in the desert, at a site being investigated by police. It belonged to my daughter. She vanished 20 years ago, along with 5 other girls from their cheerleading squad." The waitress instinctively touched her earlobe, her expression shifting from casual curiosity to stunned disbelief. I don't understand." "The police found the girls' cheerleading uniforms today," David added gently. "And then Marissa found the earring near another dig site, where we saw some men acting suspiciously." The waitress stood motionless, looking back and forth between them, as if trying to decide whether this was real or some elaborate misunderstanding. "You think this earring has something to do with your daughter?" "I know it sounds unbelievable," Marissa said, her voice softening. "But I gave my daughters matching earrings like that for their 13th birthday, months before they disappeared. That's not a common design. The odds of you wearing an identical one by chance, they're almost non-existent." The waitress slowly sank into the empty seat across from David, her face pale. The man who gave this to me, I had no idea. Do you remember anything about him? David asked carefully. She nodded, eyes distant. Not his name, but he's come in a few times over the years. Not recently, though. I know he's friends with Gerald Laffinger. He owns a ranch about 10 miles from here. Gerald Laffinger, Marissa repeated, locking the name in her mind. He's one of our regular catering clients, the waitress explained. We deliver to his ranch every day. She checked her watch. In fact, I'm supposed to deliver his lunch in about 20 minutes. Marissa and David exchanged glances, adrenaline suddenly surging. I don't know if I should be telling you this, the waitress said nervously. Sharing anything about customers? That could cost me my job, and jobs aren't easy to come by around here. We understand, Marissa said gently. But if this man knows anything about what happened to our girls, wouldn't you want to help? The waitress hesitated, biting her lip, then gave a small nod. Look, I can't give you his address, but I'm heading that way soon. If you just happen to follow me on the road, well, I can't control who drives where, can I? Relief swept through Marissa. Thank you, truly. You don't know what this means to us. Just promise me one thing, the waitress said, standing. If anything happens, don't mention my name. This job is all I've got. You have our word, David replied solemnly. She gave a final nod and headed toward the kitchen. Marissa and David quickly paid the bill and stepped outside, the desert sun now high overhead. Across the street, they spotted Chris Delaney at the gas station, refueling his pickup as Dusty sat alert in the passenger seat. But before they could cross over to speak with him, the side door of the diner opened. The waitress emerged, carrying insulated catering bags and loading them onto a small delivery motorcycle. She caught Marissa's eye for just a second, then looked away, strapping down the bags and mounting the bike. Let's go, Marissa whispered. They slid into their car, David starting the engine. He waited until the waitress pulled onto the road before following at a careful distance, keeping far enough back not to draw attention. The silence in the car was thick with tension. The desert rolled past on either side of the narrow highway, mile after mile of emptiness and dust. About 15 minutes later, the waitress made a turn onto a dirt road marked with a faded sign, Laughing Ranch, private property. David drove past the turnoff and pulled over just beyond sight of the entrance. Now what? He asked. Marissa didn't hesitate. We wait until she leaves. Then we go to the gate and ask to speak to Gerald Laffinger. We ask about his friend, the one who gave her Amber's earring. David frowned. That's a big risk. We don't know who's back there. Maybe we just note the location and give it to Detective Holbrook. They reversed and parked on a low ridge with a partial view of the ranch. From this angle, they could see the entrance clearly. The entire property was fenced in with tall wrought iron gates, surveillance cameras fixed to each post. Beyond the gates stood a sprawling main house, a few outbuildings that looked like cabins or guest quarters, and further out, horse stables. They watched as the waitress arrived at the gate, dismounted, and handed her delivery to a uniformed guard. The size of the order, several large containers, suggested it wasn't meant for one man. What kind of ranch needs catering for that many people? David asked quietly. Maybe he has a lot of ranch hands, Marissa replied, though the doubt in her voice matched his. Something about this place didn't feel right. A few minutes later, they saw the waitress retrieve her empty containers and climb back onto her bike. She turned and rode away, the motorcycle trailing a cloud of dust as it disappeared down the road. Marissa's eyes remained fixed on the gate. Something was happening behind those walls, and she wasn't leaving without answers. Should we call Detective Holbrook? David asked, his thumb hovering over the screen. Marissa hesitated. We don't have real proof yet, just a trail of coincidences. I doubt the detective would act on it without something solid. Before they could decide, the heavy iron gate creaked open. A blue Jeep rolled out. Inside were 3 men, the same ones they had seen in the desert earlier. Marissa instantly recognized them. Their shirts, their hats, even their posture. "That's them," she whispered, ducking down in her seat. David tensed as the Jeep rolled past their parked car. Just for a second, one of the men in the back looked straight at them and locked eyes with Marissa. "They saw us," she said tightly. "We need to leave, now." David threw the car into gear and pulled away from the shoulder. In the rearview mirror, he saw the Jeep slow, then make a sharp U-turn. "They're following us!" Marissa twisted around in her seat. The Jeep was accelerating, gaining fast. "Drive faster." David pressed down on the gas, but their vehicle wasn't built for speed, especially not on a rough, dusty road. Within minutes, the Jeep was right behind them. Then it pulled ahead, cutting them off and forcing David to brake hard to avoid a crash. The Jeep's doors flew open, the same 3 men stepped out, and 2 more vehicles came into view behind them, speeding through the now open ranch gate. "David!" Marissa breathed, fear rising in her chest like a flood. "What do we do?" But it was already too late. Surrounded, one of the men motioned to them sharply. "Get out of the car, now!" With no choice, Marissa and David stepped out, hands raised, the desert heat pressing down on them like a weight. "Who are you?" another man demanded. "Why are you watching the ranch?" Marissa straightened her back, forcing strength into her voice. "My name is Marissa Green. This is my husband, David. Our daughters disappeared 20 years ago. We believe someone on this property might know something about it." The men exchanged brief glances. Then the one with the radio stepped aside and spoke into it. "We've got the couple from earlier. They say they're looking for their missing daughters, awaiting instructions." There was a pause. Then a voice crackled through, "Bring them in." With no other option, Marissa and David were escorted to one of the arriving vehicles and driven through the gates of Lavender Ranch. Whether they were walking into danger or finally closer to the truth, neither of them knew, but there was no turning back. Inside the ranch, the atmosphere shifted completely. The grounds were immaculate, neatly trimmed hedges, flower beds in perfect bloom, and a sprawling main house that looked more like a luxury estate than a ranch. The illusion of serenity only made the situation more unnerving. They were led through a side entrance and down a hallway lined with expensive artwork, Western landscapes, bronze sculptures, polished wood. Eventually, the men brought them into a study, large desk, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and tall windows framing the distant desert hills. "Wait here," one of the men said. Before leaving, they searched both of them, taking wallets, phones, car keys, anything that might connect them to the outside world. Then, they locked the door behind them. David tried the handle. Locked. "Great. We should have called Holbrook," he muttered. "It's too late for that now," Marissa said, already scanning the room. The desk drawers were locked. Nothing in the room could be used as a weapon. "What do they want with us?" David asked, pacing. "If they're involved, why not just leave us in the desert? Why bring us here?" Marissa shook her head. "They have a reason. I just don't know if that's good or bad." Footsteps approached. The door opened, and in walked a man, mid-60s, broad frame, sharp suit, and a polished gold watch glinting under the light. His hair was silver, his posture commanding. He looked like a man who didn't just own land, he owned power. "Mr. and Mrs. Green," he greeted smoothly. "I'm Gerald Laffinger. I understand you've been asking about me." Marissa didn't hesitate. "Where are our daughters?" He blinked slowly. Straight to the point. "I admire that. But you must understand. It's unusual for strangers to spy on my property, trail my people, and show up at my door." David placed a steadying hand on Marissa's arm. "We found things," he said. "A cheerleading uniform buried in the desert. An earring that belonged to our daughter Amber. Your friend gave it to a waitress in town. and a truck tied to Caraway Performance and Fitness, which used to sponsor our daughter's cheer squad. Marissa added, all of that, and it all leads back to this ranch. Laffinger's expression didn't change, but in his eyes, something shifted, a flicker of awareness, of memory, or guilt. You've been busy, Laffinger said, folding his hands behind his back, but I'm afraid you've wandered into something far bigger than you realize. Then explain it to us, Marissa demanded, her voice sharp, trembling. Tell us what happened to our daughters. Laffinger moved to sit on the edge of his polished desk, his cold eyes assessing them like pieces in a game. Information like that comes at a steep price, Mrs. Green, and I'm not sure I'm the one who should be giving it. What price? She asked desperately. We'll pay anything. Just tell us where April and Amber are. A cruel smile played on his lips. It's not about money, and since you already know too much, I don't have many choices left. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Outside, the three men from the Jeep waited. Take them to the special accommodations, Laffinger ordered. If they want answers, let them meet the women. Make sure they're comfortable. They'll be staying for quite some time. One of the men hesitated. Sir, are you sure? Yes, Laffinger said coldly. Let the old dancing man decide what to do with them. You can't do this, David protested as the men entered and grabbed them. People know we're here. The police, Laffinger let out a short, bitter laugh. The police? Don't worry. Desert roads are dangerous. All it takes is one wrong turn, a ruptured fuel line. Tragic accident. No one will be looking for you out here. Despite their protests, Marissa and David were dragged from the study across a manicured lawn and toward a large barn in the distance. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Wooden stalls, hay bales, saddles neatly hung. But at the back, behind what appeared to be a supply closet, a hidden staircase descended into the earth. Move! One of the men barked, shoving David forward. The steps were steep, the air turning cool and damp as they descended. At the bottom stood a thick metal door, secured with a glowing keypad. One man entered a code, the lock disengaged with a beep, and the door swung open. What lay beyond was shocking. An underground bunker, large, sterile, and too intentional to be anything but planned. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, cots lined one side of the room, a makeshift kitchenette on the other, and a small bathroom walled off with steel panels. But Marissa didn't see any of that. Her eyes locked instantly on the three women sitting on the cots, watching them. They looked to be in their early 30s, pale, thin, but alive. The men forced Marissa and David to their knees and bound their hands to a steel pipe that ran vertically through the center of the room. The heavy door slammed shut behind them. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the lights and the echo of their own breathing. Then, one of the women spoke, voice soft and unsure. Who are you? Before they could answer, footsteps returned on the stairs. The door opened once more, and Laffinger stepped inside, surveying them with smug satisfaction. This, he said, gesturing around the room, is what I meant when I said there was a price for information. You'll have all the time in the world now to learn the truth. You're here with the survivors. Survivors? David echoed, the word catching in his throat. Laffinger ignored him. He turned toward the women. Ladies, meet your new roommates. I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about. As he moved toward the exit, he paused. And don't even think about helping them escape. You remember what happened the last time someone tried, don't you? One of the women flinched. Another turned away, wiping her eyes. Then the door slammed shut. Locks engaged. Outside, his muffled voice echoed through the bunker door. That damn dancing man. Get me Matthew and Caraway on the line. And let's pray Caraway isn't talking to the cops to save his own skin. Marissa froze. Caraway, the cheerleading coach, he was involved. Her mind raced as she looked back to the women. They were still watching her, wary and unsure. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please help us untie these ropes." The three women exchanged glances, fear flickering in their eyes. Then one of them stood and approached, moving with caution. She turned her back to them, lifting her shirt slightly, revealing a web of deep scars across her skin. "This is what happens when we break the rules," she said, voice flat. "If we help you, it'll be worse." Marissa's breath caught. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "But please, we're looking for our daughters, April and Amber Green. They were taken 20 years ago, along with 4 other girls, cheerleaders." The woman froze, her body stilled as if turned to stone. Then, slowly, she turned to face Marissa, her eyes wide, locked on her face, studying it. "Mom," she whispered. "Dad?" Marissa's heart stopped. David made a strangled noise beside her. "April?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm April," she said, her voice trembling. "It's me." Emotion overtook him. "Oh my God," David whispered. "We found you." April fell to her knees beside them. With trembling fingers, she reached for the knots binding their wrists and began to untie them. April's hands moved fast but carefully, her fingers working at the knots with urgency. "We can't make noise," she whispered. "They monitor this room sometimes." Marissa watched her daughter, a woman now, and tried to reconcile the face before her with the girl she had lost 2 decades ago. April's features were older, harder, worn by suffering, but beneath the pain was the unmistakable trace of the child they once knew. "What happened to you?" Marissa choked out, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Where's Amber?" April paused, her face contorting as grief flickered behind her eyes. "Only 3 of us made it," she whispered. "Me, Kira Thompson, and Hannah Lee." She nodded toward the 2 women on the cots, who now approached with guarded curiosity. "Rachel, she died," April continued. "She got sick, something they refused to treat. They just let her waste away." Marissa closed her eyes in horror, trying to process what she was hearing. "And Amber?" she asked, though her soul already braced for the answer. April's hands trembled as she worked. "Amber and Lily were killed. They tried to plan an escape, tried to get us out, but they found out. They made us watch. Called it a lesson." A sob escaped Marissa's throat. David wept openly beside her, shoulders heaving with grief. "I'm so sorry," April whispered, finally loosening the last knot and freeing her mother's wrists. "I never thought I'd see you again. What are you even doing here?" As she moved to untie David, Marissa explained everything. The cheerleading uniforms found in the desert, the earring, the waitress, the lead that brought them here. "The police know we were following a trail," she said. "They'll come looking for us when we don't check in." April shook her head grimly. "They won't find this place. They've kept us hidden for 20 years. This bunker is soundproofed. We've screamed until our voices gave out. No one hears." David, finally freed, pulled April into a fierce embrace. "We're not giving up," he whispered. "We'll find a way out." Kira and Hannah stepped forward, introducing themselves. Marissa hugged them both tightly, imagining their parents still waiting, hoping. "They never stopped looking," she told them. "None of us did." "Who did this?" David asked, his grief sharpening into fury. "Who took you?" Kira spoke first. "It was Caraway. Coach Caraway. He and his men drugged us after the competition. We woke up here. Laffinger owns the ranch," April added, "but Caraway is the one who controls everything. He visits once a month. No one else touches us. Just him. And there's another man," Hannah said. "Matthew Rance. Everyone thinks he runs Caraway's company, but he's just a cover. The real owner is still Laffinger." Marissa's mind raced. Holbrook had said Caraway sold the company 20 years ago, but that was a lie. He just put it in Matthew's name, she muttered. To protect himself if anyone started asking questions, April nodded. Exactly, it was all a front. The sheer weight of what they'd endured was staggering, and just as they began to whisper about escape, a noise broke the silence. Distant shouting. Then, gunfire. April jumped up, helping David grab a metal food tray. "We have to try, even if it's soundproofed," she said. David began banging the tray rhythmically against the steel pipe, the noise deafening in the confined room. They took turns, banging, shouting, pleading for someone to hear them. The shooting above stopped. Then faintly, movement. Boots on stairs, voices. "Police! Is anyone down there?" Hope surged. Everyone shouted in unison, guiding the voices to the locked door. Seconds later, a beep. The heavy lock disengaged, and the door swung open. Police officers in tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised, then quickly lowered as they assessed the scene. "We need medical," one officer called into his radio. "We have 5 living captives, looks like the missing cheerleaders, and 2 others." Marissa gripped April's hand as they were led up the stairs. She couldn't let go. Not now. Not again. Outside, the ranch had transformed into a flood of flashing lights. Police cruisers, ambulances, federal vehicles. Several bodies lay under white sheets, men who had resisted and paid the price. Near the main house, Detective Holbrook stood directing officers. Beside him, Marissa spotted Chris Delaney and the waitress from the diner, both visibly relieved to see them alive. Further down, Gerald Laffinger and the men from the desert were being loaded into separate cruisers, hands cuffed behind their backs, watched closely by armed guards. Marissa stepped forward, voice breaking from emotion. "Detective," she called out. "We found them. We found April, Kira, and Hannah." She paused, swallowing the grief. "But the others didn't make it." Detective Holbrook approached quickly, eyes wide with both urgency and relief. Detective Holbrook's face was a storm of emotions: shock, relief, and something harder, resolve. "Mrs. Green, Mr. Green, are you all right? We've been searching for you since the hiker and the waitress reported you missing." "It's Caraway," David said, urgency in every syllable. "He's the one behind it all. He took the girls, all of them, 20 years ago. He's been holding them here, like prisoners." Holbrook's jaw clenched. The detective turned to the nearest officer. "Get on the radio, all units. Priority 1. Locate and apprehend Vincent Caraway. He's dangerous. Block all roads out of the county. Search his house now." As paramedics moved in to assess them, Marissa was caught in the storm of her own emotions. Overwhelming joy at having found April alive, soul-deep grief for Amber, and a burning need to see justice done. They had uncovered part of the truth, but not all of it, and what they knew already was more horrifying than anything they had imagined. At the police station, chaos had taken hold. Detectives, federal agents, victim advocates, and media swarmed. After 2 decades, the coldest case in Chandler's history had erupted into headlines again. In a quiet interview room, Marissa, David, and April sat side by side, refusing to be separated. April clung to their hands as if anchoring herself to reality. Across the hallway, Kira and Hannah gave statements of their own, guided by trauma counselors. Detective Holbrook entered the room with water and a box of tissues. He looked exhausted, but his focus was laser sharp. "We've shut down all the exits from the county," he reported. "Caraway won't get far." "Has he already run?" David asked. Holbrook nodded grimly. "His house was empty, closet cleaned out. We think he bolted right after his interview at the station this morning, but we'll get him." Then he turned to April. "I know it's a lot," he said gently, "but if you're ready, we need your statement. We need to understand what happened, both then and now." April took a deep breath and nodded. "I want to tell you everything. I want him caught. I want him to pay for what he did. To all of us." Holbrook switched on a recorder and placed it on the table. "For the record, can you state your full name?" "April Michelle Green," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I was abducted on May 17, 1995. My sister Amber and 4 other girls from our cheer squad were taken too." "Can you tell us what happened that night?" April's eyes fluttered closed for a moment as she gathered herself. "We had just finished competing. Regionals. We placed second. Everyone was excited, getting changed in the locker room." She hesitated, then continued. "Coach Caraway asked Rachel Collins to stay back, said he wanted to talk about her technique. The rest of us ran across the street to grab sodas from a convenience store. When we came back," her voice faltered, "we walked in on him, touching Rachel, in the storage room." Marissa's grip tightened around her daughter's hand. Rachel was crying. He kept saying she was special, that she was going to be his sole wife. That's what he called it. April looked away, her face pale. When we confronted him, he pretended nothing was wrong. But then he left the room and came back with 3 men, same ones from the ranch. They had syringes. She swallowed hard. They injected us. I remember feeling dizzy. Then everything went dark. She glanced up at the detective. "We woke up in that bunker, all 6 of us. Rachel told us it wasn't the first time he had been inappropriate. He'd been grooming others, promising them careers, scholarships, if they stayed close to him." Holbrook nodded gently. "And after the abduction? At first, we were sure someone would find us, but days turned to weeks, then months, then years." She described the routine, how Caraway would visit monthly, how Laffinger and Matthew Rands handled the rest, the food, the supplies, the rules, how they were never allowed above ground without blindfolds. "Rachel got sick," April said quietly, 5 years ago. "Fevers, infections, they gave her some pills, but not enough. She died down there." Marissa's eyes filled with tears, thinking of Susan Collins, who would never see her daughter again. "And Amber?" Holbrook asked gently. "And Lily?" April gripped both her parents' hands. 3 years ago, we tried to escape. Amber stole a key card from one of the guards. We waited until the middle of the night." Her voice trembled. David wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We made it out of the bunker. We were so close, but the alarm went off." She paused, trying to hold herself together. "Amber and Lily were ahead. They got caught first." She looked up, her eyes burning. "Caraway was furious, said he needed to teach us a lesson. He made us watch as he—" Her voice broke. She couldn't finish, but she didn't have to. The room was silent. No words could hold the weight of what had been said. Detective Holbrook reached over and gently turned off the recorder. "That's enough for now," he said quietly. "You've been through hell, but you're not alone anymore." April leaned into her father, and Marissa closed her eyes, clutching her daughter's hand as tightly as she could. They had found her, and now they would make sure the world knew exactly what had happened and who had to answer for it. "After that, he strangled them," April said, her voice barely audible. "Told us if anyone else tried to escape, the same would happen. We stopped hoping after that. We just survived, day by day." Detective Holbrook's pen stopped. His face was tight with quiet fury. "And the ranch?" he asked, voice steady. "What else was it used for?" April exhaled slowly. "We think it was a front, for something bigger. We heard pieces. They talked about routes, shipments. I think drug trafficking." David nodded slowly, connecting the dots. Those large catering deliveries. They weren't just for feeding ranch workers, were they? "We'll dig into all of it," Holbrook said. "FBI's en route now. The trafficking and abductions put this into federal territory." He turned back to April. You mentioned the earrings earlier, the ones your mother gave you and Amber. Do you know how one ended up with the waitress? April nodded. Matthew Rands took them after Amber died. I heard him tell a guard he liked how they looked. Later, I heard him brag about giving one to the pretty waitress at the diner. He kept the other as a trophy. And the cheer uniforms? Holbrook asked. Why were they buried now, after all these years? I don't know for sure, April said, but a few weeks ago, I overheard Caraway arguing with Laffinger. He wanted anything that could connect them to us gone. He told Laffinger to handle it. I think that's when they decided to dump the uniforms. But they got sloppy. They thought the desert would hide everything forever. As the hours passed, April continued revealing the unimaginable truth of their captivity, details no one should ever have to speak aloud. By the time the interview ended, the sky outside the police station had turned to deep dusk. Holbrook rubbed at his eyes and stood. We'll need more from all of you in the coming days, he said gently. But this is more than enough to start. The FBI will take it from here. What happens next? Marissa asked, still holding April close, afraid to let go. First, you'll be taken to the hospital. Medical exams, trauma support. All of that is being arranged. After that, we'll move you somewhere secure. This case is going to be everywhere soon. We'll protect your privacy however we can. Just then, another officer appeared at the door, gesturing for Holbrook. He stepped outside, and through the glass, they saw his face shift, concern turning into grim satisfaction. He returned moments later. We've got him, he announced. Caraway was intercepted by Highway Patrol trying to cross into New Mexico. He's in custody, being brought back to Chandler now. Marissa felt her knees weaken with relief. The man who had taken everything from them, who had stolen daughters, lives, time, would finally face what he deserved. It doesn't bring Amber back, she whispered, but it's something. There's more, Holbrook said. Our team is processing the ranch. So far, they've uncovered financial ledgers and communications linking Caraway, Laffinger, and Matthew Rands to a long-term trafficking network. CPF, the cheer program, it was all a front. April nodded, weariness settling over her. The guards would talk sometimes about drop points, schedules. It was never just about us. Moments later, the door opened again. It was the waitress from the diner, flanked by an officer. Her eyes were red from crying. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. If I had known what that earring meant, who those men were. You saved our daughter, Marissa told her, rising to embrace her tightly. You helped us find her. We will never forget that. The waitress reached into her pocket and held out the earring, the one that had started everything. This belongs to your family, she said softly. I don't deserve to keep it. Marissa took the small silver star in her hand, closing her fingers around it. A twin to the one buried in the desert. A tiny fragment of truth that had broken open a mystery. Thank you, she whispered. The officer beside her added, Mr. Delaney wanted me to tell you he's glad you're safe. He came straight to us when he realized something was wrong. Marissa nodded, making a silent promise to thank Chris Delaney properly one day. Without his instinct, and his dog's nose, they may never have known the truth. As they exited the room, Marissa glanced into other interview rooms. In one, Kira clung to her parents, Linda and Robert, both of them sobbing in disbelief. In another, Hannah sat with her father, Michael, tears running silently as they reunited. Her mother had passed 3 years earlier, never knowing her daughter was still alive. And in the hallway, the faces of Susan Collins and the Riveras twisted in grief as they received the news that their daughters, Rachel and Lily, had not survived. Their cries echoed across the station, cutting through the air like broken glass. April paused in the corridor, her own tears falling freely now. I wish I could have saved them, she whispered. Rachel, Amber, Lily, they deserve to come home too. David placed a hand on her back. You survived, he said softly. You kept their memory alive. And now their stories will be told. And the men who did this, they'll answer for it. Marissa pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the weight of her again after 2 long decades of absence. There was no roadmap for what came next, no guide for grieving one daughter while beginning to rediscover another. But they had the truth now, and they had each other. A chapter of their lives, long buried in silence and sorrow, was finally coming to an end, and something new, something healing, was just beginning.